The 1% Rule, Why Your Small Habits Are Either Building You or Breaking You. Alt titles, You Don't Rise to Your Goals, You Fall to Your Habits, / The Tiny Choice You Make Every Day That Decides Your Entire Life.
Okay, quick question before we do anything else. If you woke up tomorrow and did exactly what you did today, every single day, for the next 5 years, where would you end up? Be honest. Don't answer too fast. Because here's the thing nobody really wants to say out loud. You're not failing because you lack motivation. You're not stuck because you're lazy. You are exactly where your habits have quietly, patiently, invisibly built you to be. And over the next 30 minutes, I want to show you why the smallest, most boring decisions you make today are secretly writing the story of who you become. So stick with me here, because by the end of this, you're not going to look at a small habit the same way again. I promise you that. Let's start with a question that sounds simple, but really isn't. Why do some people just seem to get a little better every year? A little healthier, a little wealthier, a little more at peace? And other people who want it just as badly, who are just as smart, sometimes even trying harder, stay stuck in the exact same place for a decade. Same desire, same intelligence, sometimes more effort. So why the different outcome? Most people think the answer is talent, or luck, or willpower. It's none of those. The answer is habits. And I don't mean the big dramatic decisions you make once in a while. I mean the tiny, repetitive, almost invisible things you do, or don't do, every single day. And here's the part that should honestly unsettle you a little. Habits are so small, so quiet, that you rarely notice them shaping your life while it's happening. You only see the result years later, when you look in the mirror, when you check your bank account, when you realize you haven't called an old friend in 3 years. By then, it feels like it happened overnight. It didn't. It happened 1% at a time. So no, this isn't going to be one of those videos about massive life transformations or some 15-step morning routine you'll quit by Thursday. We're talking about something a lot more realistic than that, and honestly, a lot more powerful. We're talking about how tiny, almost laughable little habits compound into a completely different life, and how you can start using that today to your advantage. Let's start with the biggest lie most of us believe about change. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Big Leap. 2 to 5:30. Somewhere along the way, we all got sold the same story, that change happens in one dramatic moment. The rock bottom breakdown, the New Year's resolution, that "this is it" speech you give yourself at midnight. We love that story. It's exciting. It makes for a great movie, but it's also exactly why so many of us keep failing, because we're waiting around for a moment of transformation instead of just quietly building one day by day. Here's a picture that might help. Think about a plane taking off from Los Angeles headed to New York. If the pilot shifts course by just 3.5 degrees, the plane doesn't land in New York anymore. It lands in Washington, D.C. 3.5 degrees. That's it. Not a dramatic turn, barely even a nudge, but stretched out over thousands of miles. That tiny shift changes the entire destination. Your habits work exactly like that flight path. A habit that improves your life by 1% a day doesn't feel like anything in the moment. 1% is basically invisible. It's the extra glass of water, the 10 minutes of reading instead of scrolling before bed, the one flight of stairs instead of the elevator. None of it feels significant. None of it gives you that little hit of, wow, I really did something today. And that right there is exactly why most people quit. They try the habit for 4 days, look in the mirror, feel like nothing's changed, and decide it just doesn't work. But here's what almost nobody sees in the moment. 1% better every day, compounded over a full year. That's not 365% better. That's roughly 37 times better than where you started. And 1% worse, compounded the same way, it drags you down to almost nothing. So really sit with this for a second. You're not failing because the habit isn't working. You're failing because you're judging a compounding process by tomorrow's results instead of next year's. Think about a farmer for a second. She doesn't plant a seed and then dig it up every week to check if it's a fruit tree yet. She waters it. She protects it. She trusts a process she literally cannot see happening. And then one day, months later, there's a tree standing where there used to be nothing. Your habits are seeds. And most people give up right before the roots break through the soil. So if it's not about the big leap, what actually is a habit underneath all this? What's really going on in your brain every time you do or resist one? That's where it gets interesting, because your brain isn't randomly forming habits. It's running a loop it's been using since before you could even talk.
Chapter 2. The Loop. Running your life without your permission. 5:30 to 9:30. Every habit you have, good or bad, follows the exact same hidden pattern. And once you see this, you genuinely can't unsee it. You'll start spotting it in your own life within minutes. Here's how it works. First, a cue, something in your environment or your emotional state that tells your brain, hey, it's time. The buzz of a notification, the smell of coffee, that restless boredom around 9 p.m., the sight of your running shoes by the door. Second, a craving. This is the emotional pull behind the cue. You don't actually crave the cigarette. You crave the relief it gives you. You don't crave the phone. You crave the connection or the escape it promises. Third, the response, the actual action, picking up the phone, lighting the cigarette, lacing up the shoes. And fourth, the reward, the payoff that tells your brain, that felt good. Remember this? Do it again. Cue, craving, response, reward, over and over, thousands of times, until it stops being a decision at all. It's just automatic. Here's the part I really want you to sit with. Your brain doesn't actually care whether a habit is good for you. It only cares whether it satisfies a craving. That's why doom scrolling at midnight is so much easier to keep doing than going to bed early, even when you know which one actually serves your future. The habit that wins isn't the one that's best for you. It's the one that feels best, right now, in this second. And honestly, this should let you off the hook a little. You're not weak for struggling with good habits. You're human, running a loop that evolution built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. But here's the part that changes everything once it clicks. If a habit is just a loop, cue, craving, response, reward, then you don't actually need more willpower to change your life. You need to redesign the loop. Want to build a new habit? Make the cue obvious. Make the craving attractive. Make the response easy. Make the reward satisfying. Want to break a bad one? Flip it. Make the cue invisible. Make the craving unappealing. Make the response hard. Make the reward feel empty. That one shift from I need more discipline to I need to redesign my environment and my loop is the actual difference between people who change their lives and people who spend the next 20 years blaming themselves. But there's something even deeper than the loop, something that decides whether a new habit sticks for good or quietly disappears in 3 weeks, like it always seems to. And it has nothing to do with the habit itself. It has to do with who you believe you are. Chapter 3. The Identity Trap. Nobody warns you about. 9:30 to 13:30. Here's a question that kind of exposes why most habits fail before they even start. When someone offers you a cigarette and you say, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit," versus when you say, "No thanks, I don't smoke." Those two sentences sound almost the same. They're not. They come from two completely different places, and they predict two completely different futures. The first person is still relying on willpower, fighting a craving in real time, trying to override who they believe they are. The second person isn't fighting anything at all. Smoking simply isn't part of their identity anymore. There's no internal battle, because there's nothing left to battle. This next part is the aha, give it room. This is the part almost every every self-improvement video skips. Most people try to change their habits by focusing on the outcome. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to write a book. I want to save money. And sure, that sounds motivating, but it's fragile, because the second you hit that goal, or the second progress feels too slow, the motivation just collapses. There's a deeper layer underneath outcomes. It's identity-based change. Instead of asking, what do I want to achieve? Ask, who do I want to become? Then ask, what would that person actually do? Someone trying to lose weight might skip the gym on a hard day and think, it's fine, I'll go tomorrow. But someone who identifies as a person who doesn't miss workouts experiences that exact same hard day completely differently. Skipping isn't a small slip anymore. It contradicts who they believe they are. The habit starts reinforcing itself, not because they're more disciplined, but because identity is doing the heavy lifting now, not willpower. This is why so many of us can white-knuckle a new habit for a month and then completely collapse back into old patterns. We change the behavior. We never change the belief about who we are. And when belief and behavior don't match, belief almost always wins. Gentler here, this is the encouraging part. But here's the good news, and I mean this. Identity isn't fixed. It's not something you were born with and you're just stuck with forever. Identity gets built, quietly, through repeated evidence. Every time you complete a small habit, you're not just checking a box. You're casting a vote for the kind of person you want to become. One workout doesn't make you a fit person, but it's one vote for that identity. One page written doesn't make you a writer, but it's one vote. Most people assume identity has to shift first, and the behavior follows. It's actually the reverse. Small behaviors, repeated, are what produce the identity. So the real question was never, what habit should I build? It's this: what's the smallest action I could take today that counts as a vote for the person I actually want to become? Just sit with that question for a second. It can genuinely change the direction of your whole next year. But even with the right identity, even with the right loop, most people still get one thing devastatingly wrong. It's the reason they quit right before their breakthrough. And honestly, it's probably happening to you somewhere in your life right now, without you even realizing it. Chapter 4. The Valley. Where Dreams Go to Die. 1330 to 1730. Picture an ice cube sitting in a room that's exactly 25 degrees Fahrenheit. You slowly start raising the temperature. 26, 27, 28. Nothing happens. The ice cube looks exactly the same as it did at the start. 29, 30, 31 degrees. Still nothing. And if you were watching this without knowing what's coming, you'd honestly assume the whole thing was pointless. Nothing's changing. Why keep going? Pause before this. Then it hits 32 degrees, and suddenly the ice starts to melt. The exact same amount of effort was applied at every single degree. The results just didn't show up until the very end. This is exactly what happens with almost every meaningful habit in your life. And it's the single biggest reason people give up right before their transformation. There's a stretch of time, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, where you're doing everything right, and it looks like absolutely nothing is happening. That stretch actually has a name. It's called the plateau of latent potential. It's the gap between the effort you're putting in and the results you can actually see. And during that plateau, your brain, which is wired for quick, visible rewards, starts screaming that this isn't working, that you're wasting your time, that maybe you're just not built for this. Slower, warmer, reassuring. But the truth is, the results were never missing. They were just being stored. Every workout that didn't visibly change your body was still rebuilding muscle underneath the surface. Every clumsy, unimpressive page you wrote was still sharpening a skill you couldn't measure yet. Every dollar that felt too small to matter was still compounding, quietly, in the background. And here's the part that should change how you approach every goal you have from now on. The frustration you feel when nothing seems to be happening, that's not a sign you're on the wrong path. Most of the time, it's a sign you're close. You just can't see it yet, because the visible results always lag behind the invisible work. Most people quit at 29 degrees. They did the work, they showed up, and they stopped 1 degree, 1 week, one small effort, away from the exact moment everything would have clicked. This is also why relying purely on motivation is such a fragile strategy. Motivation is highest right at the beginning, when everything feels new and exciting, and it's lowest right in the middle of the plateau, exactly when you need it the most. If you're only running on how you feel in the moment, you'll almost always quit during the coldest, most invisible part of the process, right before the ice starts to melt. So what actually gets people through the plateau? Once the motivation's already left the building, it's not more inspiration. It's something a lot less glamorous and a lot more reliable. It's your environment. Chapter 5. You don't have a willpower problem. You have an environment problem. 1730 to 2130. Okay, this next part might sting a little, but stay with me. Most of what feels like a personal weakness in you is actually a design flaw in your surroundings. If there's a bowl of candy sitting on your kitchen counter, you don't need more discipline to avoid it. You need to move the bowl. If your phone is the first thing you see when you open your eyes, that's not a focus problem. That's a visibility problem. The most successful people you admire aren't more disciplined than you. Not really. They've just engineered their surroundings, so the right choice takes almost no willpower at all. And this matters because willpower isn't stable. It moves with your sleep, your stress, your hunger, your exhaustion. Building your entire strategy for change around just having more willpower is like building a house on sand. During hurricane season, it might hold for a little while. It will not hold forever. Environment doesn't get tired though. It doesn't have a bad day. It's working on you at 7 a.m. and at 11 p.m., whether you're feeling motivated or not. Simple, almost matter of fact. Let the idea do the work. So here's the principle. Make good habits obvious and easy. Make bad habits invisible and hard. Somebody trying to eat healthier who puts cut fruit at eye level in the fridge and buries the chips behind the pasta. They're not relying on willpower every time hunger hits. They already made the decision back when they had energy for it. So their tired, hungry, end-of-day self doesn't have to fight a battle at all. This is sometimes called designing your environment for your worst day, not your best one. Anyone can stick to a habit on a good day. Rested, motivated, inspired. The real test, the one that actually shapes your future, is what you do automatically on the day you're exhausted and nothing feels worth it. If your environment's doing some of the work, your worst day still moves you slightly forward instead of dragging you back. And there's one more layer to this that's easy to miss. Every environment you spend time in is quietly training you, whether you notice it or not. Spend enough time around people who normalize excuses, and excuses start to feel normal to you too. Spend enough time in spaces built for distraction, and distraction starts to feel like the default setting of your life. You're a lot more influenced by your surroundings than you'd probably like to admit. Lift here. Turn it into good news. But that's actually the good news. It means you have way more control over your future self than you think. You just have to exercise that control through your surroundings, not through sheer force of will. Change the room, and you change the behavior. No dramatic burst of motivation required. But there's one more piece, the final one, that ties all of this together. The loop, the identity, the plateau, the environment, and it's something you can actually start using today, in the next 5 minutes, no matter how overwhelmed your life feels right now. Chapter 6. The 2-minute rule and the art of starting small. 2130 to 2530. Here's a mistake almost everyone makes when they decide to change their life. They start too big, a little playful, self-aware. They decide, in a burst of motivation, to work out for an hour a day, wake up at 5 a.m., read a book a week, and overhaul their entire diet, all starting Monday. And by Thursday, it's collapsed under its own weight, because that version of starting was built for a person they hadn't become yet. The people who actually succeed long-term, they almost always start absurdly, almost laughably small. So here's the idea, and it's a simple one. Shrink any new habit down until it takes 2 minutes or less. Read every night becomes read 1 page. Work out daily becomes put on your workout clothes. Meditate for 20 minutes becomes take 1 mindful breath. At first, this sounds too small to matter. And that's kind of the whole point. The first phase of any habit isn't about getting results. It's about mastering the art of just showing up. You can't build a lifelong habit on a foundation you can't hold up on your busiest, most exhausted day. But almost anyone can find 2 minutes. Warm, slightly amused. This is the trick of it. And here's the funny thing that tends to happen once you actually start. Even with something this small, reading one page often turns into a whole chapter. Because starting was the hard part, not continuing. Putting on your workout clothes often turns into an actual workout, because you're already halfway there. The 2-minute version isn't a lesser habit. It's the doorway into the real one. And this connects right back to identity. Every time you show up for your 2-minute version, that's another vote for the person you're becoming. Even on the days when 2 minutes is genuinely all you've got. Consistency at a small scale will always beat intensity you can't sustain. A habit done imperfectly every day will always beat a perfect habit done occasionally. Because the compounding only works if the chain doesn't break for long. This is also where most of us misjudge our own progress. We compare our messy, small daily habit to somebody else's polished, years-in-the-making result, and we feel like we're failing by comparison. But that polished result? It was once someone else's clumsy 2-minute version too. You're not behind. You're just early on your own curve. And the curve always looks unimpressive right up until it doesn't. Bring it home. Slower. More sincere. So, here's the real invitation underneath everything we've talked about today. You don't need a new personality. You don't need a burst of motivation you can't sustain. You don't need to wait for some dramatic rock-bottom moment to finally change. You need one tiny, almost forgettable action, repeated, consistently, until it eventually becomes who you are. The plane shifts 3.5 degrees. The ice cube sits at 31, then 32. The 1%, repeated, becomes 37 times better by the end of the year. None of it looks like much on any single day. All of it changes everything, given enough days. Outro, 25:30 to 30. So let's go back to the question I asked you right at the start. If you did exactly what you did today, every day, for the next 5 years, where would you actually end up? Pause. Really let this land. Notice something. That question probably feels different now than it did 30 minutes ago. Because now you know it was never really about motivation or willpower or waiting for the right moment. It was always about the loop you're running, the identity you're quietly voting for, the invisible plateau you might already be standing on, closer to the edge than you realize, and the environment shaping choices you thought were entirely your own, direct, personal. Talk to one person. So here's what I actually want you to do with this. Not eventually. Today. Pick one habit. Just one. Shrink it down until it takes 2 minutes or less. And do it today. Not as a resolution, not as a someday plan, but as one small, quiet vote for the person you're choosing to become. You probably won't feel different tomorrow. That's not failure. That's exactly how it's supposed to feel at 26 degrees. At 1%. At day 3 of something that only makes sense looking backward. But if you keep going, if you let this compound the way it's built to, there's going to come a day, maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, where you look at your life and you barely recognize the person who used to feel stuck. And when that day comes, you won't remember one big dramatic turning point. You'll realize it was never one big moment at all. It was every small, unimpressive day, quietly leading you here. Soft smile in the voice. You already know what that one small habit is. Honestly, you knew it before this video even started. The only question left is whether today's the day it finally gets a vote. Curiosity hook for next video. And if this changed the way you think about your own habits, there's one more piece of this we haven't touched yet. The exact moment a habit stops requiring any effort at all and just starts running on its own. That's next. And trust me, once you see how that actually works, you're going to wish somebody had told you sooner. I'll see you in the next one.